Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast. Our primary objective is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never quit. The reality of life is simple. We all fall. We all fail. At times, we get knocked down. The question is, do we get back up? Are we stronger? Are we better prepared to attain the maximum of our potential? Thank you for joining our No Quit tribe. As you go for your greatness today, never quit. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. Welcome to episode number 408 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is champion-minded. Our quote of the day comes to us from Don Meyer. You don't have to win a championship to be a champion. Champions are not just athletes. They are anyone who is determined to succeed. With the holiday season right around the corner, if you are looking for some fun and inspirational apparel, we would love for you to head on over to positivitytribemerch.com. You can pick up one of our t-shirts, sweatshirts, or any of our cool bands. Once again, that is positivitytribemerch.com. I really enjoyed speaking with our guest today. I have read many of his books, and I think you will truly appreciate hearing what Allistair McCaw has to share with us. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Allistair, I'd like to welcome you back to the No Quit Living podcast.
I feel honored to be back. Thank you, Christopher.
So, I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it again. Are you ready to positively impact at least one person today?
Absolutely. And it's incredible. That's also part of my purpose and my goal in life as well, is if I can just influence one person today, that's a win.
And if you do that tomorrow and the next day, it's a streak, it's momentum, and it's what has a significant influence on people. How do you personally define success, or what does success mean to you?
It's pretty simple. And I think this is such an important question to ask others is, if you ask who wants to be successful, all the hands in the room will go up. But to me, success is waking up healthy, which might sound cliche. But when you've lost your health or you're struggling with your health, you learn to appreciate it very, very quickly. We know many a million billionaire that would swap all their money in the world to have their health back. So number one, it's waking up healthy. Number two, it's being able to choose the day I want to live and spend it around the people that I enjoy being around the most. So basically, what I would say success is freedom of choice, deciding what my day is going to look like and who I get to spend it with.
And I think it's a really neat question. And what I've found just in my personal and professional life is your definition of success changes over time. And I think if you ask somebody at the age 20, 30, 40, 50, and 60, and they have the exact same answer, I would say two things. One, they're probably not aiming high enough, or two, maybe it's time for them to pivot or change things up.
Christopher, it sounds so obvious, but when you ask this question, when you pose this question to people, they struggle to actually answer. I don't know if you've experienced that, but I've experienced that in my live audiences and speaking and asking that question is, who wants to be successful? All the hands go up. Who can define clearly what is success to them in two areas for me, in your life and in your career? Can you define what success looks like in your life? And can you define what success looks like in your career? And I believe it's such a critical question to ask yourself and have the answers to.
I couldn't agree more. And take it one step further, I've found working with my own individual clients, but also sports teams, coaches, and in the corporate world, sometimes you don't need to have that definition from day one or day two. I think it happens over time, but then going back to my point before, I think a lot of times you pivot in regards to whether it's business, sports, your definition of success changes over time. Obviously, any team, any company wants to be ultimately successful. They want to win a championship or become very profitable or launch a new division or something like that. But then I also found, and I'm curious to get your 2 cents on this, I think it's also those little small wins along the way, which lead to that ultimate quote unquote success.
Yeah, 100% with what you said regards that your definition of success will change. Success to me 10 years ago is completely different to what it is today, and 20 years ago and 30 years ago, etc. I think when you tend to be younger, your ego maybe gets a little bit in the way of wanting possessions and materials and all these fancy things. But later on in life, it's appreciation of freedom of time and spending time with the people that you love the most. I think that's key. Chris, success is a little bit like asking that question, what is your purpose? And I think a lot of people sometimes panic a little bit when they don't know what their purpose is, and they question themselves, what's wrong with me? Why can't I find my purpose or my passion? And these are things that happen over time, that the more experiences you have and the more you're willing to put yourself out there, you will discover your passion and you will discover your purpose. And I believe that every single person on earth has a unique talent and a unique ability that maybe they haven't discovered yet, but keep knocking on the doors and you'll eventually find it.
I think that's really on point. And I do a lot of work in high schools and colleges. I know you do a lot of work with athletes as well. And I truly believe, to piggyback off what you said, that everybody has greatness within them. Now, I want to be clear. I don't in any way, shape, or form think anybody and everybody can be great at anything, but I think every single person has one or two things in them that they can be great at. The question is, do they find it, first of all, and second of all, do they put in the time, energy, and effort to become great in it? But it goes back to purpose, passion. And I think one thing that I'd like to get your perspective on, working with kids in their late teens and early 20s, I think in today's day and age, sometimes people are looking to shorten that runway and find out their purpose right this second. And now I'm not saying whether you find it out when you're 20 or 80, but I think so many people focus on, I need to find my passion or what I quote unquote want to do right now. And if I don't find it by 21 or 22, then I'm quote unquote a failure.
Yeah. This is something I discovered in speaking to young adults and students in college and even high school kids as well, is, you don't have to have all the answers. Even in my late 40s, I don't have all the answers. And that's a good thing, because, that excites me to get up tomorrow morning and ask more questions and discover and learn more. But, Mark Cuban said it well, where he said, especially in your 20s, you should be about discovering as much as you can and making mistakes. And listen, nobody likes to make mistakes and fail. But you use your 20s as I like to term it, being an explorer, of working different jobs. You don't have to have the right job and the perfect job straight away. It's also a good experience to work in a toxic culture and a poor culture to see what that looks like, to see what you don't want. All these experiences, and this is something I'm very grateful for. I never went to college. I went straight to work after school. Unfortunately, my grades weren't even good enough to get into college. But I had multiple jobs. I waited in restaurants. I worked in gyms. I worked in retail stores. All these things that at the time were probably not ideal and not really where I pictured myself. But later on, I realized, wow, all those experiences and the people skills that it gave me as well were just I can't learn those in a book.
No. And I think that goes back to my point too, which is you don't need to figure it all out today, but it's trying different things and it's failing along the way. And I just love how you touched on that. You have a bunch of your books behind you. We're recording over video, but we only release on audio. But a lot of your books have the word champion in the title. And I was curious, what does it mean to you, or how do you define champion, or what it means to be a champion?
Yeah, thanks for that question. A lot of people see a champion as the winner, the person standing on the top of the podium, or the person that's won the award at the end of the day. For me, a champion is someone who embraces the journey and who overcomes obstacles and adversity. For me, I have great admiration and I'm inspired by people, but not what they achieved, but what it took to get there. The journey it took to get there. That's inspirational for me. Of course, it's fantastic standing on top of the podium and being the winner. But a champion is also all about being excellent at the things that require zero talent. And there's this famous meme that's on Instagram, and I've shared it once or twice, and I wouldn't be able to list probably all 10 right now, but those are things that require zero talent. Those are things that are controllable. For example, your attitude, your energy, your preparation, doing the extra work required, your effort level. Those are controllables, and those require zero talent. They just require a choice. Being coachable is another one, which is massive. And, I was on a podcast, I think it was last week, where we were talking about coachability. And Christopher, I believe that coachability starts in the family, in your upbringing. As a parent, that you're teaching your kid how to be coachable, how to be teachable. Now, of course, anyone who has younger kids or teenagers know it all. I thought I knew it all as a teenager, but when you can teach them that being coachable is about listening, about being respectful, about taking in the information, you get a great head start in life.
I just took a bunch of notes, and I reached over for a book because I know where it is, that 10 things that require zero talent. And I've seen a couple of different variations of it. But to your point, I'll take it a step further. A lot of the work I do with teams early on in the season, we go through an exercise of listing all those things that we have control over. And it's a fun exercise, and players give their input, and usually we have a big whiteboard or somebody writing it down. And then the very next question are, what are those things that we have zero control over? And when you identify them and we try to put them side by side, it's a pretty easy next step where you say, okay, out of these two lists, what are the ones that you really want to stress about and think about and put your energy and effort in, the ones that you have zero control over or the ones that you can control? And obviously when you see it side by side, especially young athletes, they say, okay, so yeah, I'm not going to influence or impact a referee or umpire to change a call. So instead of worrying about that, I can worry about my energy, my effort, how I respond or react to a quote unquote bad call. But I love that meme, and I think it's been shared probably a million times on all different social media platforms.
It has, and it never gets old either. And it's so applicable, not just in the sports field, but in the classroom and in the workplace.
I almost think that every school or company should have it up there as you go in, or when you're signing your contract, the manager or boss should just, slip it in there by accident and be like, oh, sorry, that wasn't supposed to be in there.
I think that's a great idea. And if you just give me a second, I'm just going to trademark that straight away. So
you can definitely trademark it. Morning routine is something that we look at quite often on the show. And I'm curious if you have a morning routine that you swear by.
Yes, I do. So I generally like to get up around about 5:36 in the morning. The first thing I start with is gratitude in the morning. And it's a habit that I built, which I actually share in my forthcoming book, of how I built that habit. There's always that quote or that phrase, start your day in gratitude. Yeah, that's nice. But I really took it to the next level, Christopher, where I was like, okay, I really do want to start with my day in gratitude, but sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, because I forget. And then I realized that maybe middle of the day, I forgot to practice my gratitude this morning. So this is how I did it. Very simple. I wrote a stick-it note which said gratitude. I wrote gratitude on it. I stuck it next to my bedside table on the lamp. So every morning I woke up, I saw the word gratitude on this stick-it note. And I discovered that after 90 days, maybe I'm a slow learner, but I call it the 99 habit rule, that it takes you 90 days to ingrain a habit and only 9 days to lose. And I discovered that after 90 days, I was able to wake up without having to look at the note to remind me. So I no longer needed the cue. So I did this probably about 3 years ago, just before COVID. And still to this day, I wake up and the first thing that comes into my head is gratitude. And it's not a bad way to start your day. I was able to ingrain that habit. So I start my day with gratitude. Just two thoughts. What am I grateful for today? It could be anything. The fact I get to come on this podcast today and share. The fact that I get to play maybe pickleball in the morning with some friends. I'm grateful for that. I will walk Emma, my dog, in the morning, which is also just a really important part of my morning. Just peaceful in our community. I'll then have some coffee. maybe some breakfast, and then I'll head off to pickleball, which in America is one of the fastest growing sports. I'm loving it. And that's how I spend my morning. My day work-wise actually only starts at around about 12 o'clock. I'll have lunch, and then I'll have calls. I'll do podcasts like this. I'll do some writing later on in the afternoon, or prepare for a presentation. And that's really how I spend my day, which I love.
And I think it's such a fun question, and I almost feel guilty sometimes asking it, because I feel like I do it selfishly, but I know that so many people in today's day and age really are looking at not only the morning routine, but also the evening routine, how they start and end their day. And when you look at the whole part of your day, most of us have things, appointments, calls, meetings. We have to go places, and we don't always have control over that. So I think the opportunity to bookend your day is super important. I asked you this question when we did the first time, so I'm going to ask you again. And I know the answers, but I'm curious. I know you know the famous Jim Rohn quote, "You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." If I could grant you dinner tonight with any 5 people, dead or alive, who would you pick?
Angela Merkel, the German chancellor, would be one. I've always admired her leadership qualities. She always just seems so calm and in control, especially in such a hostile environment. So Angela Merkel would be one. Sir Alex Ferguson, the English football manager. Jurgen Klopp is another English football manager. So my apologies to the American listeners who maybe don't know who those two gentlemen are. Growing up in South Africa during the 80s and 90s, I experienced apartheid, and I experienced Nelson Mandela being released, which was an incredibly special time. I feel privileged to have brought up in that time. So Nelson Mandela would have been definitely a person I would love to have met and spent time with. To have the humility and grace to be, in prison for 27 years, and especially us as white South Africans, were really fearful of what could happen. And he came out with just, peace and reconciliation and love. And it was, for me, I was, luckily old enough to really understand it, of how powerful that was. For me, that is leadership. 5th person, I'm sorry if I'm going very sports orientated here, but the great Ayrton Senna, the Brazilian Formula One race car driver, who unfortunately passed away at the early age of 34 in 1994. I remember the day, May the 1st. I was watching on a black and white television in my parents' kitchen. Yes, we were very late to the color TV game in South Africa, and unfortunately, Ayrton was killed in that accident. But they say he was, and I believe it as well, one of the greatest drivers ever.
That is dating yourself back to the black and white television. I think some of our listeners have no idea what a black and white television is. Yeah. So as an author, you can't answer any of your books, but I'm curious if you're reading anything currently, or if you've read something recently that you'd like to recommend to our listeners.
All right. So I'm cheating a little bit at the moment, because I have 2 books downstairs, which I actually can't even remember the title. The title. How bad is that? So I'm cheating here by you can't see if you're listening, because this will be on video, but I really enjoyed a new book that was brought out by Sally Jenkins called The Right Call. Sally Jenkins is the daughter of the famous journalist, and she really just gives you a behind the scenes look at just the great athletes, the great teams. She was able to be, around great athletes like Michael Phelps and Bill Belichick and all these coaches and great leaders. So that's a great book. Yes, the book downstairs. Sorry, Hunger in Paradise. I think his name is it Rasmus Ankerson? It's definitely Ankerson. Maybe I might get his first name wrong, but Hunger in Paradise is an incredibly interesting book. I think you'd enjoy it as well. It's about people or companies that have complacency when they have success. So in other words, a successful company saying, well, we've always done things this way and we'll continue. Why do we need to change? And if we look at products like Nokia, Blockbuster, Kodak, we all know what happened to these massive, massive companies, especially Kodak. There's a famous quote where the CEO of Nokia, when the first iPhone came out in 2007, said that it was just a gimmick, and nobody would buy the iPhone because it was heavy. If you dropped it, it would break. The battery life was so short. So our Nokia was still the best phone and always will be. And we obviously know what happened there. So Hunger in Paradise is a great book. The Right Call, and I'll give you one more. And I'm going to sound very generic here, but anything from John Wooden, Coach John Wooden. Principles, values for life, and not just for sports or a business.
Sally Jenkins' book, The Right Call, is a fantastic book. I just finished reading that myself a couple months ago. Doing what you do, I'm curious to get your answer to this question. When it comes to specific sports, is there an athlete that really defines mental toughness to you, that you would say this athlete really, really had it?
So, living in Florida, one of the main reasons why I came to Florida, moved to Florida, was to work with the great Nick Bollettieri, who's was a famous tennis coach, worked with all the best tennis players in the world. So I worked alongside Nick in the early 2000s at IMG Academy down in Bradenton. And so I was involved in the professional tennis world for a long time. Got to spend a lot of time with players like Rafael Nadal and Roger Federer, where we'd be on the same court. I'd work with players that would practice with them. We'd be in Abu Dhabi and Monaco and all these places. So I got to be alongside these type of quality athletes a lot. Got to talk to their coaches, learn as much as I could. So I would say that those two were incredible athletes, incredible ambassadors. But Novak Djokovic, what he's doing at the moment, be you a fan or not, you have to admire how mentally tough this guy is, because he was playing not just Roger or Rafa in those tournaments, he was playing the crowd all the time. And to an extent, now that Roger and Rafa are pretty much, Roger's retired and Rafa's almost there, Novak is still playing against the world. It seems like everybody wants his opponent to win. So the fact that this guy can turn up, I mean, he's now got the all-time record in Grand Slams. I think it's 23. I was watching him last week in Paris on television, and just the crowd were against him, and that almost fuels him to just go another level up. And so I would say the most mentally tough athlete, I mean, there's been greats. There's been Muhammad Ali. There's been Michael Jordan. There's been all this Serena. But Novak Djokovic is really just so impressive.
Yeah, I like how you gave your point of view, and I couldn't agree more. He's got the all-time record, but he was always playing against not only the crowd, but he was always playing against somebody else. And unless it was a nobody, if it was Rafa or Federer, the crowd always wanted them to win. The announcers almost always wanted them to win. But he used that not only to his advantage, and I think the just work he's put in over the last 15 years, not only physically getting himself to the level he is now, but the mental perspective. So I'm glad you touched on that. I always ask this question, or I typically try to ask it, but today's day and age, obviously social media has a large presence. I'm curious if there are one or two people that you follow on social media that put out good content that maybe you would like to possibly introduce or reintroduce to our listeners.
Gosh, there's so many. I really enjoy the work of George Raveling, who was the basketball coach and a Nike ambassador. In fact, George Raveling was one of the when he was 18, he was one of the security personnel at Martin Luther King's famous speech, "I Have a Dream." And when Martin Luther was walking off the stage, George, and he explains this well as well. He said he didn't know where it came from, but he said, "Sir, may I have your speech?" And Martin Luther King gave him the piece of paper with the written speech on it. So he still has that to this day. So I love his newsletter and follow him on Twitter. He doesn't put as much out there anymore. George is now 80, somewhere in his mid 80s. But I love his perspective. So that's one person. Another person that I enjoy following would be, let's see, and I don't want to go sports here. I like Jesse Itzler. I like some of his messages as well. If you know who Jesse Itzler is, he's the husband of Sarah Blakely, who's obviously started Spanx, but they just seem like an incredibly successful couple. I like his perspective on life as well. There's something that he talks about which is so powerful, where he asked the guest, how old are your parents? And the guest said 60. He said, okay, the average American lives to the age of 78. Okay, so that means they've got, let's just say they have 18 years. We're working on average. And he said, how many times do you see your parents a year? And he said, well, they live in the other side on the East Coast, and probably once a year. He said, okay, let's just say they have 18 years. That means you have 18 more visits, to put it into perspective. So, bottom line is, cherish every moment you have with the people you love, your family. Don't take them for granted. When I see my mom or dad's name pop up on the telephone, I just think how lucky I am, because maybe one day that name won't pop up on the phone, on the screen. So yeah, I really enjoy Jesse's message.
I think his approach and his point of view on so many things are just so spot on. I'm glad you shared that story, because I think it's so powerful, but not just with your parents. You could take it one step further into anything you do in regards to, let's just say you go on 2 vacations a year with your family, and it's like, okay, are you going to, worry about having one bad day of weather, or are you going to enjoy the fact that you're on vacation? Yes, maybe it's raining and it's not ideal, but it's really looking at the perspective, and that goes back to how you start your day with gratitude. So I'm glad you touched on that. For our listeners that would like to connect with you, follow you, find out more about you, what's the best way for them to do that? And I know you have a book coming out. I believe you said end of this year or next year. So I know that's exciting as well. So I'm sure our listeners will want to figure out where they can find you and get in touch.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. Yeah, pushing hard to get the book out by the end of the year, but probably realistically beginning of next year. I'm very active on Twitter, which is my name, at Allistair McCaw, and on Instagram, Be Champion Minded. And my Instagram is just more motivational quotes and inspiration, those type of things. So those are two of the easiest ways to get in touch. And then, of course, all my books are on Amazon.
And last question we have for you is, if you have some parting words you'd like to leave with our listeners today.
It's my favorite quote, which I have on one or two of my shirts, and that is that excellence is an attitude. So in everything you do, seek excellence. And you brought up the word greatness a little bit earlier, and the word success. But success for me is more of a final destination of where you want to be, but excellence is the process in the everyday, and that starts with your attitude. So seek excellence every day. You said it as well, Christopher, about the small wins on a daily basis. That's excellence right there. We tend to think that greatness is this massive thing that's only exclusive to these famous people. Absolutely not. You define what greatness is. You define what success is. And you define what excellence is for your life. And that's all that matters.
I truly, truly appreciate your time being here a second time, but only one release of the podcast. I truly hope that our listeners enjoyed this as much as I did. And I know that you and I will connect again soon. So thank you for jumping on here again.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to episode number 408. Allistair is quite an interesting guy with a very impressive background. I love what he shared about his definition of a champion and the importance of embracing the journey. In his parting words, Allistair shared how excellence is a process every day, and it starts with your attitude. I couldn't agree more. And as we wrap up today's episode, I would like to personally challenge each of you to focus on your attitude today. You can't control the weather, traffic, or what other people say or do, but you have 100% control over your own attitude. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time.
and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.